Awesome. All right. So yeah, just any issues, just feel free to message one of us. If you're having some trouble with the chat, I can also pop my email in there so we can make sure. But again, thank you for joining us today for the holistic approach to New York State childcare leadership with Pamela Hollingsworth. I'm going to read a little bit about her because she has years and years of experience, and we're so happy to have her with us here tonight. So let's see. And Pamela is an early childhood educator, content expert, strategist, and advocate with more than 30 years of experience managing and building programs for children and these significant adults in their lives. So 30 years of experience, you're in good hands tonight. She began her career in the corporate childcare sector, holding positions ranging from preschool teacher to multi-site manager. She fulfilled a lifelong dream when she became the owner of a childcare center that served children from birth to 13 at the intersection of neighborhoods living in great wealth as well as great poverty. She also holds a master's degree in multicultural education with a focus on strategic leadership. And she is a sought-after consultant and speaks nationally on topics such as transforming organizations, managing change, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and building inclusive communities. She develops content and training institutes for a host of entities in the areas of business development, child poverty, teacher preparation, family engagement, building strategic partnerships, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Pamela, and I will pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, and good evening, everybody. Hello, the house, as we say. I'm coming to you tonight from sunny Miami, which is not my first home. I'm actually a New Englander, born and raised in Boston, but have been living in the Miami area just over 35 years. So happy to be with you. And thank you to Alyssa, to Nadej, who's going to be running our PowerPoint this evening, and to everyone else from the Early Care and Learning Council. I'm very happy to be with you. The two-part session that we're going to be experiencing together over the next month is something that I typically do in 8 to 10 segments. So we are going to go over what our areas of focus are going to be this evening. One of the things I do want to say is that I invite all of you to lean in and participate. This is meant to be a session in which we will be mutually co-constructing information. I always see myself as the guide on the side rather than the sage on the stage. And so that definitely is the way we're going to proceed this evening. So I'm calling this the New York State Child Care Business Leadership Institute. And as Alyssa mentioned, I typically take a holistic approach to everything that I do, but especially to conversations around strategic planning and leadership development. And in this case, again, something that has certainly been representative of my life work, which is the early education sector and building frameworks inside of that sector. Nadej, can we go to the next slide, please? Some of you may have been in presentations with me before. I have had the privilege, and I was sharing with Alyssa and Nadej earlier, I did do a two-part session for the CCR&R network for New York State on equity in September 2021, I think September and October. I did a preschool expulsion presentation in Westchester County at their conference last May, where Walter Gilliam was the keynote speaker. And right now I'm working on doing some statewide work for New York, supporting the PDG grant and for the Stand Up for Parents project, and I'm the diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'll be recording a session for them, I believe, next week. And then, of course, so happy to be with all of you this evening for this two-part session relating to leadership development, business leadership inside of early education. During the course of this evening, you're going to hear a lot of very hyperbolic adjectives and adverbs describing the early learning system, especially given the pandemic and as we emerge from the pandemic, that it's broken, that it's, that it was always broken, that it's damaged, that it's in crisis, and you're going to see that represented throughout the course. That's part of what we're here to talk about. When I began to speak to Alyssa, she, mentioned that there was a question: how do we recruit staff in times like these? How do we keep our programs going in times like these? So we are going to touch on all of that tonight and talk about some things that may be a little bit difficult, but I firmly believe that we're going to come out of the other end this evening feeling with a sense of rebirth and restoration as we go back into our early childhood programs the next day, whether you're running a program, whether you're an administrator that supports a program, which is what my work is now, rather than being in day-to-day childcare operations or as an owner, but however you serve children and the significant adults in their lives. It is my hope that you'll come out of this session feeling optimistic and feeling confident that early education, and especially childcare and family childcare, are still standing. I usually start with a land recognition, and it usually is focused on the indigenous and native folks that came before all of us. However, in honor of, and in an effort to truly elevate the early education profession, today I am opening in recognition of the Real Magicians. The Real Magician is actually one of my favorite essays that was published in an early childhood journal, written by the folks at UNICEF, and it's about 15 years old. It's framed in my office, in my home office, and has been for many years, really talking about the amazing tools, the amazing work that teachers do internationally with very little tools. And I really feel that's emblematic of the early childhood profession, that we have always been asked to do a whole lot with very little. But this evening, as we begin, I'd like us to take a moment to recognize the real magicians. And from my perspective this evening, that is all of us, all of you, childcare owners, operators, educators, and the many others who move this world. Just remember that the journey of the children in this picture and all the children that we touch either directly or indirectly through our work every day, their journey is impossible without each and every one of you. Let's go to the next slide, please. You heard a little bit about me from Alyssa, and that actually is the number is updated. I'm now 32 years in to this career, this life's work, and I've pretty much done it all at this point. I've spent the days walking around with a toddler on my hip, running childcare centers, whether they belong to somebody else or whether they belong to me. For the past 13 years, I've been heavily involved in the not-for-profit sector, doing quite a bit of consulting. I've really seen that blend between corporate childcare, private childcare, and then working at this point, much of my work is spent working in the deeply siloed and very culturally focused neighborhoods in Miami-Dade and Monroe counties, covering from the county line of Miami Gardens all the way down to the southernmost point in the United States, which is the tip of Key West. Inside of my not-for-profit work, I've run a quality rating improvement system. I've written grants nationally. Now my work is primarily focused on systems building, a little bit of policy work, and building programs. So I certainly like to keep it interesting. So let's move to the next slide, please, and talk a little bit about what I'm suggesting the norms for our time together this evening will be. And I always start with my opening norm is always remembrance of the indigenous folk in Alaska with whom I had the pleasure to do some work some years ago. And there is a leader in every seat, and that's all of you, as well as me. I also want to share that we will co-construct knowledge. I mentioned as we started off that I'm not the sage on the stage. I'm the guide on the side. I'm here to kind of educate you just a little, but hopefully to get you thinking, to get you pondering, to get you contemplating, reflecting, possibly picking up some new knowledge, but at the same time sharing your lived experiences for the good of this group. We will take an approach to community-based problem solving. And we're going to spend some time this evening kind of laying out the problem, giving all of you an opportunity to spend some time talking about your response, your feeling. What's your lived experience in the early education arena? What are you reading? What are you believing? What are you being told by center directors? Or what are you experiencing as a child care owner? I'm inviting you to lean in and to share often. And you can do that in one of two ways. You can unmute and talk. You can raise your hand if that's more comfortable for you. And certainly you can use the chat box. And then one thing that I would say is, as you step forward, please step back to allow someone else that's sharing this screen with us this evening an opportunity to speak, so that we can exercise the essence of serve and return as we get to know each other and as we spend this time together. Let's move to the next slide and talk a little bit about my perspective of holistic learning. I truly believe that it's experiential. I believe that our lived experiences are essential to any kind of work that we may be learning together. I always say that going into any kind of sessions or teaching opportunities, that for me, they really are learning opportunities. So the opportunity to learn from you this evening is something that I'm very much looking forward to. And it's going to be personalized. It's going to be in many ways led by you and facilitated by me. It's both teacher guided and self-guided. So that's why I'm asking you to lean in and then to lean back. And we always want to consider the community, the points of view, the experiences, the perspectives of everybody that is in the Zoom room with us this evening. It's social and emotional always. It's always touchy-feely with me. And I do see this as an opportunity for us to strengthen relationships, both internally this evening, and also what you will take out into your practice tomorrow, whether you work from a desk, whether you work from a classroom, whether you work from the front office in a child care center, however you fit into that continuum of folk who have dedicated their lives to working with children in the birth to 5 space. We are always setting out to be culturally sensitive. That's essential to holistic learning. And at the same time, we will focus on data. I'll be sharing some numbers with you this evening. What you will see is, and if we could actually cut and paste the PowerPoint in the chat box, that would be terrific. And I know that Alyssa is going to be sending it to you. Thank you, Alyssa. I know she's also going to be sharing it with everyone. You will find inside of the PowerPoint deck, and you're seeing it in front of you right now, that there will be numerous highlight live links for you to do some reading. So the content that I have for you this evening, that I've prepared for you this evening is here for you. And then as you get toward the end of the PowerPoint deck, you will see an in-service section. And that in-service section is going to provide you with several opportunities to listen to a podcast, for instance, or read an article, or watch a seminar. I included a particularly, I thought, interesting seminar on the impact of COVID on the early education sector. And that was taped just the early part of November. So there's some very much up to the minute information for you. And during that in-service portion, what you can walk away and take with you and read and learn and watch and contemplate. I also invite you to join me on December 9th for an office hour at noon. There is a Zoom link on the in-service page, and you can tune in. I'll be there waiting for you, whether you come or whether you don't come. And if there's something that's caught your attention, if there's something that you've been thinking about and you want to talk a little bit more about, any kind of give and take that you'd like to have as we prepare for our second session, which is going to be on December 13th, that is there for you. And then the final page is resources. Some of the resources inspired my work with you this evening. Some are directly, you'll see that I've actually pulled paragraphs from that. And in many cases, as we walk through the PowerPoint, you will see direct links that I've pulled information from. And this slide is actually a perfect example. You can see that this is adapted from Sprig Learning, characteristics of holistic learning. So that gives kind of a good overview of the way this PowerPoint deck is structured and the way this two-part plus an in-service format is going to be structured as well. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is what it's going to look like. Today's the 29th of November. Here we are for 90 minutes for our first institute. The in-service session I just described. Walk through it, see what strikes your fancy, listen, read, watch what you choose. I hope you will join me on December 9th for an office hour at noon. And there's your Zoom link. And then we'll be back on the screen again on the 13th. I would also say, if you want to bring a friend or a colleague the next time you come, these sessions will lead into each other, or they will be cumulative, but it will be very much possible for someone to come to just one session or to join us for the second session. And now let's go to the next slide. So a quick overview of what our evening looks like, is going to look like, the topics that we're going to be touching on. And so we are going to be going at breakneck speed. We're going to talk a little bit about childcare in the news, taking that treetop view, the headlines, the literature. I'm sure you've seen it. You can barely turn on the news these days, turn on the radio, go onto Instagram, go onto LinkedIn, go onto any kind of social platform and see something not very good, something a little bit terrible about early education. Of course, the good news is that finally, at long last, we're getting the attention that we have so richly deserved for these past many years. And I like to say that people are just starting to figure us out. We're then going to be talking about, where are the children? Are you having enrollment challenges? What do they look like? How is it hitting your community? I can tell you that I talk to providers almost every day. And for every provider that tells me I have 3 classrooms that I cannot open because I can't find teachers or I cannot maintain teachers, I have programs that are fully staffed, fully enrolled, and are wondering what the problem is, that nothing has changed for them. However, I am hearing more of the former than the latter, admittedly. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and talk a little bit about the economic landscape and what does that mean for us as childcare providers. We're also going to talk about the true cost of care. I'm calling it the 60-pound gorilla in the room. You know, I do feel that often there's almost a stigma to a childcare center being profitable. You will see that a writer named Elliot Haspel, who has written a book, a recent book published in 2022 about the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the early learning system. And he works for the Center for American Progress and actually has a monthly blog. And he actually, he actually wrote a blog post a couple of months ago, basically talking about the problems with profitability in corporate childcare. I'm here to tell you this evening that not only is profitability not a dirty word, I think we all know that it's absolutely essential to keeping a program going. And I think that's something that working with providers to encourage them to be resilient in the face of all that the pandemic has brought us. And we know the numbers. We know that we've lost many programs. We know that many thousands of early educators have left the field and they may never come back again. But how do we navigate that? And how do we come back from that? How can we come out of this saying, yes, we're still standing? So we're going to talk about the importance of profitability and how, in order to run the best business for children, you've got to achieve and maintain profitability and be prepared for the next crisis. And then, of course, who's teaching the children? What does recruitment and retention and staff development look like post-pandemic? How do you compete with Arby's, Barnes and Noble, Starbucks, $17, $18, $25 an hour? I'm talking to you this evening from Miami, Florida, where there is a huge early education childcare crisis. Restaurants, the hospitality business industry have raised wages to $20, $25, $27, $30 an hour. And so lifelong early educators are having to make decisions. Do I stay or do I go? So how do we deal in an environment with that when that is unfolding? Workforce development partnerships, what do they look like? How can we get innovative in identifying and sizing up your new competition? Very early on in the pandemic, I organized a professional development summit in South Florida for early educators to kind of, bring the professionalism back into conversations. And if any of you are familiar with the Council for Professional Recognition, which is the organization that administers the National CDA program, Dr. Calvin Moore was newly minted. He was actually the acting executive director at that time. He was brand new in the job, and he delivered the keynote address at the summit. And he talked about, in very excited terms, what he felt was coming. Despite all of the drawbacks inside of the pandemic, how many opportunities there were for early educators, for those of us that could be nimble and be innovative and adapt. I didn't necessarily hear him that day, but as I went back into the world that I was working in day to day, and as I've continued to read, as I've continued to monitor what's happening in my hometown, in your hometown, and indeed across this country, I think that Dr. Moore is absolutely right. And I think these times do call for us to be innovative and nimble. And above all, I'm here to hopefully add to your toolkit and to lay the foundation for solutions for focused action. I'm not here this evening to talk to you or to tell you about a brand new way to recruit staff, how to write an employment ad. I can definitely work with you on that. But I think one of the things we all know that it's going to take a little more than that. If recruiting is an issue for you, then you got to be nimble and you got to figure out new ways to do this. And let's be looking also at new partnerships. And we're going to be talking about that as well. So that's been a mouthful from me. We're at right around 16 people. What I'd like to do is offer anyone who would like to either unmute and share, tell us who you are, how and why you've come here this evening. And let's take a look. You can also choose to answer one or more than one of these questions. And here they are. What has changed over the last 12 months at your early learning program or in the community that you're operating in? So tell us whether or not you're a childcare operator or if you are a person that works administratively to support early learning programs. Or you can tell us what you want your peers, those that are here on the screen with you this evening, to know about the current state of the issue area that your early learning program, or perhaps that your organization, is addressing. Or I would invite you to share a community-based collaboration, new or old, that your early learning program or your agency is involved in, and tell us how that's going and what you want this group to know more about. So really the ball's in your court. So I'm going to expand my screen a little bit, and I'm going to invite the first brave person to unmute and make some choices and tell us who you are.
Hi, I'm Lisa Zimmerman. I live in New York State in a rural county, and I've been doing family home daycare since 2002 when I got first licensed. And I've enjoyed it very much working with the children. Over the last 12 months in my program, I feel like I'm focusing on improving what I provide for the children just to help their development, to get them ready for school. I'm focusing more on quality instead of quantity because during the pandemic, I did lose families because mothers were working from home. Some of them still are, which I'm surprised about. But it's given me an opportunity to think what's really important to me for the children, and why I got into working with children is that I do want to help them to grow up to be stable people with the skills they need to function and feel good about themselves. So that's what I've been working on. I got a business grant that helped me purchase some better equipment for the business end. What I want my peers to know is that I feel like my values for children and very young children is really different than what I'm seeing in the media. And I'm very concerned about what is being pushed on children at such a young age. So what I do to collaborate in my community, I've been involved in the summer reading program with the local library, and just going to any things that would benefit the children to get socialization. But also I feel like reading is really important for children at a young age. So I live in a real small community, and I'm just trying my best and hoping I can make a difference.
That's wonderful, Lisa. Thank you so much. I really want to elevate your perspective, your positivity. I love hearing about your values for the children, and can really appreciate maybe the tension or the conflict. I know you didn't use either of those words that I sense that you're feeling. So would very much love to hear more about that as we go forward this evening. And we all know that reading is fundamental. So thank you for your work with summer readers, and thank you for staying, and I know these past 3 years practically can't have been easy. So very glad to have you here this evening, and thank you for unmuting first and for sharing. Who's going to follow Lisa?
Hi, Pamela. My name is Marie McCoy. I work for the Daycare Council of New York. It's a CCR&R. We're located in Manhattan. To Lisa, thank you for your service. I'm a provider specialist, which means that I work with family childcare providers. The thing that has changed over the past year when I go visit providers is the behavior of the children. I don't know if it's because they have been, home, for that year and a half, but it seems that the providers are trying to figure out how to modify their behavior. Also, they are still not really letting parents into the home, with fear still of, that COVID thing going on, but they're slowly letting them in. My daycare council, my job, we offer wellness or mental health services to providers for children and families. So, and that's going very well in terms of helping out the providers with the children. So what I want my peers to know is that, well, thank you again for hanging in there. I pray that it will get better. Continue your love for children, because you are the first avenue to their success. And again, thank you for your service.
Beautifully stated, Marie. Thank you so much. And thank you for hanging in there and remaining committed to family childcare, which on so many levels is the heartbeat of our work, especially for infants and toddlers, but for all children. I have so many colleagues who began their journey in early education in family child care homes. And one of the things we'll talk about in our next session when we talk about innovative partnerships is creating possibly or thinking about creating an entrepreneur track for high school students who can do that some kind of dual enrollment, perhaps start off with in early education, with gaining their national CDA, moving from there to their associates, but being encouraged to become homeowners or to develop their family child care homes as a first business. So there are many ways that one can serve children, and we're starting to see a good deal of excitement and energy around the country in encouraging that first step into becoming a family child care operator. So I'm very excited, Marie, to be with you this evening, and thank you for sharing. And who would like to go next? Tiffany?
Yeah, I'll just go next. I also work at the daycare council with Miss Al Marie and Miss Joy Jensen, a few of us in Thelma, Augusto. We all work at the daycare council, and what I've noticed that changed over the last 12 months is that a lot more programs are trying to get back up and running again. They've been closed, or maybe they haven't been utilizing their space as much because they haven't had as much children in their space. So now when we're going there, we're trying to just help them get back up to back to business, basically. New York City is kind of just trying to get back to somewhat normal after the pandemic. So basically helping our daycare programs and home providers get back to business and just, be able to utilize their space, and that the children in their space are able to learn and get the best out of the environment, because these new babies have evolved very quickly. So, just being up to date with the changes in the technology and things like that is basically what we do, in offering them trainers and just being there to support them. So that's basically what I would love my peers to know. I love being able to help and support the providers as well as the children in the program. It goes hand in hand, helping both out.
Tiffany, thank you for sharing. Much appreciated. And I'm glad that you came in a posse this evening with Miss Al Marie. And I'd love to hear from Miss Joy and Miss Delma. I think the four of you are a posse, maybe Augusto as well.
So I'll go next. Yeah, so there's a few of us on today. And of course, like Miss Al Marie and Miss Tiffany said, since we've out of the pandemic, we came back into the office and basically regrouped. Our focus was to help the providers open up first. So we had a lot of trainings on just getting back to business and following new policies and procedures that were put into place. But yes, like Miss Marie said, it's difficult still because a lot of the providers are still not letting the parents in to the programs, and that also includes center-based programs. So there's a lot that parents would like to see inside, but are not able to come in. So there's a little bit of worry on that piece. And then another thing that we've noticed is that, yes, there's a huge turnaround in staff. And that's basically because they don't have enough funding coming in. And yes, we are also part of helping them acquire all these new grants that are coming out and getting them processed. They're coming into the office for assistance. We're on the phone with them for hours, just basically trying to help them like step by step, literally, because they're not very tech savvy. So there's always language barriers that we noticing a lot more. There's a lot of diversity now, that's for sure. So we have a lot of different races, mixed races, it's a big melting pot at this point. Not that it has never been. New York is like the most biggest melting pot. However, it is challenging for all of the ones that are non-English speaking, and they're diving in, you know, and it's courage to do that, to start a business and basically come out into the communities, because that's another thing that they're afraid of. They're afraid to market, but they want to market, but they're afraid of being outdoors and marketing, you know. So we have Miss Tiffany, who's our boosting enrollment strategy specialist, and I and Augusto, we lead on the business trainings, and Miss Almarie as well. So, you know, we are out there, feet on the ground, and we are supporting all of these providers. But yes, there is a big turnaround with staff, and that has been very problematic for them.
Okay. Thank you for sharing and painting that vivid picture for us. And Miss Tiffany, when we get to the marketing section, we're gonna call on you and ask you to unmute again to help us out a little bit in that area. I'd like to make space for anybody else, maybe 2 more people, and maybe if you'd like to add something in the chat box, and we'll move on a little bit. But is there anyone else who would like to share and tell us at least who you are, why you're here this evening?
Sorry, I can go. My name is Kaidi. Excuse my voice. I am recovering from COVID. So yeah, I feel much better, but I still have the voice and the cough and everything. But I work for a CCR&R as well. I work in Childcare Connections at Family of Woodstock in upstate New York. I've been there for a little over a year, but prior to that, I had been in the childcare field for 15 years. I worked for 10 years as an assistant director in a Montessori-based group family daycare. And then I owned and operated my personal daycare for 5 years. It was a family daycare, but it was in a schoolhouse building. Mm-hmm. So I operated it very much as a business. You know, separate building, separate utilities, separate phone, separate email, everything separate, you know. Didn't really commingle anything personal with my parents from the daycare and things like that. But I work now at the Child Care Council as the business TA and manager. And my main focus there is to help some of the family daycare providers really begin to see their business as a business. A lot of them, because they are operating out of their home, you know, have one checking account and they just, you know, do all their expenses and all their taxes from the same account. And, you know, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just kind of bringing those strategies of like, you know, operating more as a business so that when you are doing your taxes or when you are, you know, doing your expenses and even drawing a salary. A lot of family daycare providers don't even draw a salary for themselves. So I remember when the first stabilization grant came out and one of the things you could use it was on payroll. That was a struggle to like, I had to guarantee a lot of the providers that I was talking to that it was okay, that they could use it to pay themselves, because a lot of them had just never done that in 15, 20, 25 years, you know, and they just didn't want to get in trouble. So it was a lot of like going in and saying, no, that's what these funds are for, but it's also to like operate as a business. And I'm happy to give you some trainings on, you know, budget keeping and record keeping and creating a budget and contracts and policies and a lot of that. So that's what I do mainly. I help people apply for the grants and then I give them the business training component. But I just recently started school again. So I am getting my early childhood degree myself. because I have a degree, but I have a degree in criminal justice, which maybe is not, it's not so different, right? Sometimes we feel like, but I am getting my early childhood education degree, and I feel like what I really want to venture into is more of a trauma based care and kind of equity, and just being of Hispanic descent, just really working with that sort of equity and inclusion, and that sort of avenue. So perhaps in the future that's something that I will go into.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing, Kaidi, and thank you for sharing your perspective. And yes, paying yourself first and running your early learning program like a business is essential for longevity. And especially, I think that's one of the things we've learned, hitting the tough time of the pandemic, and then of course the continued ability to kind of shift gears and navigate when tough times hit. So thank you for your work, and thank you for being here this evening. I want to make space for one more, and then we're going to move on. Okay. No takers, then let's move on. Let's, I'm going to collapse my screen a little bit so that I can read. Let's go to the next slide, please. Nadej. So childcare is in the news. It's everywhere. Here, I'm just really wanting to point out, and I mentioned earlier, all of the hyperbolic terms that are being used surrounding childcare. I felt in listening to so many of you this evening, and when Lisa was talking about the work that she's doing, and you feel the excitement and the positivity, and for many of you, I'm hearing that coming through. But there's no doubt that while we were a fragile business industry network before the pandemic, and many of us did not come through the pandemic in one piece. And so, terms like crisis and a broken system. I've read so many articles or entered into so many conversations, and actually sat in a few panels myself about whether or not childcare was a broken system and how long has it been broken. I think it hasn't been as well taken care of as it should have been. I think we are in a place where we are now working to make sure that we're no longer left behind. And I think that's a good thing for us as an industry. So I've just given you a few titles here. We're just going to go very quickly through. The childcare industry is struggling 2 years into the pandemic. How has the pandemic affected cost and availability? The new government report paints childcare system as unworkable. That's another term I'm hearing a lot. A wake-up call for childcare. Childcare professionals endured higher rates of depression, stress, and asthma during the pandemic. And as we get further on into our time together this evening, I actually am going to share a few statistics from a study that was led by Walter Gilliam at Yale. Really kind of for a good piece of the pandemic, really highlighting the relative vulnerability of our early learning colleagues, are mostly women who have been on the front lines throughout our cities and towns, as well as the increase in depression and stress levels as well. U.S. faces widespread childcare shortage and coronavirus pandemic. Here, again, this PowerPoint belongs to you. Click a few links, see if any of these interest you. You may have read them all. You may have written the book. You could probably write a few articles yourself. But let me ask you this. If you were writing a headline about childcare in the news, what would it read? And you can write that in the chat box. I see we actually do have a couple. Let me just open up the chat box briefly. Oh, okay, that's just a couple of thank yous. But if you could write your own headline, what would it be? I always think of just two simple words, still standing, and will continue to stand. So I hope that that's something, a thought that you will take away with you and think about this evening. And maybe we'll pick up on that when the next time we're together. Let's go to the, oh, hold on. And I'm going to read what Delma has shared. Childcare is finally receiving the attention it deserves. Now that's a headline. Thank you. Thank you, Delma. Let's go to the next slide, please. Childcare has traditionally been a politically quiet sector. I don't mean there hasn't been any resolute advocacy, but that has largely, though certainly not entirely, happened behind the scenes, at least here in the US. There isn't a long history of major public actions such as protests and strikes. That's why it has been so remarkable to see how childcare providers, parents, and other allies have risen up in the past few months to say they have finally had enough. And that's having an impact. And I definitely do see and do definitely feel that there has been an increase in advocacy. I think the conversations about the system, the birth to 5 system that is so very different from the K-12 system has become very defined. And I think I'm finding in the southern part of the country where I live, the business community is definitely listening. I'm going to, and then Katie is sharing with us, childcare is resilient, and Kathy is sharing with us, we've allowed our government to pretend that early education fits a marketplace model. They've made no investment, and the ARPA and the CARES funding doesn't change that. Thank you for that feedback, Kathy. I agree with you 100%. And while we're happy for the dollars, and states are using them, and in many cases using them pretty innovatively and wisely, at the end of this, and even states that have changed legislation, not including New Mexico, that is the state that I think I'm moving to. But when I worry about the cliff that we will fall off in September of 2024, when the clock runs out for all of the relief dollars, I'm very worried about what the future looks like. So I'd like to invite you to reflect on this, because one of my goals for our time together coming out, by the time we come out of session 2 together, is to inspire advocacy. We're going to share some knowledge. We're going to encourage each other, but there are a couple of very guaranteed roads ahead or into the future, journeys that we can partake as early educators, as systems builders, and making sure that we continue to be seen and heard and working in policy. I know we have somebody here from the Early Care and Education Council that identified as being a policy person. There will be no escaping policy and advocacy for those of us that are actively engaged in early learning. And one of our roles can definitely be to encourage those with whom we work to become that way as well. Let's go to the next slide, please. So, where are the children? Lisa, I know that you mentioned that you'd had some issues, lost some children during the course of the pandemic, that families have stayed at home. Can you talk to us a little bit about, or if I'm not putting you in an uncomfortable position, about what enrollment has looked like for you over the past 2.5 years?
Well, I'm a home daycare provider, so the maximum attendance I can have is 8 children. And at times I have been full and had 8 consistently for many years. And then I lost families when, for one thing, a few years ago, when 3 mothers were pregnant, and you can't have more than 2 children under the age of 2. So I started to lose families when babies were born. And then on the other end, they were taking children into pre-K earlier and earlier. So I started losing kids on that end too. So right now with the pandemic, one family with 2 children, I lost them because the mother was working from home and because of the fear of COVID. So that family didn't come back, even though it was one of, my really favorite children, I guess you could say. So that was a real disappointment. But now I'm at about half enrollment. And like I said, I'm trying to focus on quality rather than quantity, because just seeing the shift in where children are kind of being pushed into pre-K at earlier ages, which I don't feel is the best necessarily for them. A lot of the parents are saying, we prefer our children to be in a home-based or a smaller group where they're getting home type care and they're allowed to develop without the pressure of getting on a bus or being with a larger group of children, where they're getting more one-on-one, interaction. So yeah, my numbers are half of what they were, and it is difficult.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that, the ups and downs. Kathy is sharing in the chat box, business and economic leaders aren't really so interested in childcare, though they think they are, but they do want people to enter and re-enter the workplace. And isn't that the paradox? And we're hearing, definitely from women also having trouble re-entering the workforce because of childcare accommodations, and that continued disconnect between the business sector and the political sector as well. We think about what we almost got in Build Back Better and what we actually got. Childcare went from being on the front line to being nowhere to be found, unfortunately. So the fight continues, but that continued education for the business sector, where we see the successful systems building happening around the nation, are areas where we've been able to hook in the business sector, because not only are children their future workers, the people that they employ clearly are dependent on high quality and reliable early learning opportunities and childcare opportunities for their children. Little bit of data for you. 2020 census data shows that 40% of 3- and 4-year-old children were enrolled in preschool from 2021. So it went down, and that was down right around 14% from 2019. I took a look at the enrollment percentages in this particular report, and you can see it's sourced at the bottom left-hand side of this slide. And looking from 2010 to 2019, we were steadily at 53% nationally and change. So 53.1, 53.7. I think 2018, we were right around 53.7. So I think that's a good point of reference. And then within 1 year, we had that dramatic loss to 40%. I can tell you in the South, in South Florida, where I'm speaking to you from this evening, we experienced huge losses in Miami-Dade and Monroe counties in 2019, 2020, 2021, and we are just now coming back almost to a place where we are on par. Some of the challenges in children re-enrolling in programs, and for any of you that service early learning providers that are subsidized by state-based systems, whether it be the federal block grant, not so much Head Start, because the requirements are a little bit easier for children to get into those programs. But if a family's work status, if their ability to engage or be part of the subsidized childcare system, which I would imagine for many of us on the screen this evening is a big part of the work that we do. Based on the economics in many markets, and I would love to hear what your thoughts are about what's happening from an economic perspective across New York State. Salaries are inching up. They may not be inching up in the early learning sector, but they are truly inching up other places. And when we start talking about who's teaching the children, that's some of what we'll have to take into consideration and we'll have to own. That while Starbucks and McDonald's and Walmart and the hospitality industry, as I've mentioned earlier, the salaries have been able to inch up so that families can make a higher wage. And this is where we're losing many of our early learning preschool teachers too. But at the same time, so many families that are reaping the benefits of a higher wage based on their work are finding that they're no longer eligible for subsidized childcare. So across the nation, and I'd love to hear from any of you, I'll pause there. Throw a hand up on your screen if you'd like to share, any feedback about, what's happening in terms of enrollment. But if families are not qualifying for subsidized childcare, then clearly children are not going to be coming into the subsidized care system. We also have the situation with parents who have not re-entered the workforce. I think somebody mentioned that earlier. So another reason why children are not present. So that having been said, my friends from the Daycare Council of New York, would you like to share the family homes that you service? Kathy, would love to hear from you also. I know you've been very active in the chat box. What are you seeing in terms of enrollment challenges or successes? I continue to talk to programs that are fully enrolled inside of, again, with the contrasting with programs that have, to Lisa's point, half of the children that they had pre-pandemic. So would love to hear if I can put anyone on the spot, Kathy, Marie, anyone from the Daycare Council, if anyone else would like to share about their experience about how enrollment is pacing in the programs that you serve.
Well, I'll jump in to say that our programs are as full as they can staff for. It's heartbreaking that I have empty rooms because they can't staff them and they've got long waiting lists. The centers are as full as they can possibly be, trying to expand with some of the desert money. Home-based, most are full to their preferred capacity. They're not at, necessarily 6+2 for a family daycare, but they're as full as they want to be. And I just, what's killing me is parents that just can't find care, period. They can't find it. They qualify for childcare, the childcare assistance program, but they cannot get, they can't find care.
Yeah. Yeah. Kathy, how are you counseling programs? Tell us, in what capacity do you serve early learning programs? Let's start with that. And how are you counseling early learning providers who are looking for or struggling to find staff to then open the classrooms that you're talking to us about?
So I'm a director of a childcare resource and referral in Jefferson and Lewis counties, way up on almost to the Canadian border. Our economic development agencies gave us some money and said, pay retention bonuses to staff. So we thought this would really help hold on to staff and things like that. They're still turning over. Jefferson County said, go ahead, pay them $1,500 for retention bonuses, and they're leaving anyway. Our Head Start, which is one of the highest paying, and Fort Drum, which is also really high paying, and you can move up. And there's, Fort Drum is not full. They were down 52 positions in August. They've recovered a little bit, but 52 positions across 4 centers is huge. And Head Start is not, they're struggling for staff all the time. The fact that, kids are sick and kids have been out and things like that is actually, this sounds awful, kind of working for them, because they can at least staff the classrooms for the kids that are there. It's, we're just, the only thing that I can think is opening more family daycare homes, because even before the pandemic started, there were not a whole bunch of people that wanted to work in childcare. We used to joke that we just needed a trainload of highly skilled people to break down in Watertown and never let them leave. But there are not people that want to work in childcare. So.
Thank you for that perspective. And I know, Kathy, you mentioned a $1,500 bonus. I know we have some people on the screen from the Early Care and Learning Council that are working in the stabilization grants. Can you possibly share anything in terms of what any incentives you may be providing, any bonuses? Because a lot of what I hear, again, in national, having conversations with states that are providing staff incentives, that they are often tied to ridiculous amounts of training. So I don't want to say free money, but it's not free money. And also that it just may, at the end of the day, it just may not be worth it. And is it time for us in early learning to be looking at even larger and more significant incentives? And I'll pause there. Jessica, I saw you uncloak. I hope you're ready to share.
I'm going to jump in before Jessica, because I always jump on Jessica. I'm really sorry. It's not about the money. It's about the work. This is hard. It's hard work. It is low glamour work. It is hard work. It's not about the money. If Fort Drum can't fill, then it's not about the money.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for
absolutely.
that, Kathy.
Absolutely, Kathy. But yeah, Pamela, so in New York, we're actually coming up to the deadline. So tomorrow is the deadline for our second round, which was specifically for the workforce. And so, yes, we had to apply for what is applied to bonuses for the wages, contributions for healthcare, contributions to retirement, mental health supports, supplements for education. So very specifically to the workforce, and that had to be 75% of the grant, and then 25% of the grant could be actually to the program. So this one was specifically to try to bolster the workforce, but everything that Kathy's saying is so very true, is that we just can't get the workforce. We can't get the people that want to be in this field right now, or they do want to be in this field, but they can't support themselves in this field because we're not paying them like professionals. And that's the problem. Earlier today, I spoke to our board chair, who's Kathy's counterpart in Long Island, and she was telling me very much the same thing, that it's not that we're losing programs wholeheartedly, but we're losing classrooms within programs. So that's really where we're going to see. So our Office of Children and Family Services, when they look at the aggregate and they look and see, oh, we still have the same amount of programs, like they're looking at, we have 1,500 programs that apply, 15,000 programs that applied last year, and they see that so many of them are still open. Well, yes, they're still open, but they're all at a lot less capacity than they were before.
Yeah,
that's the
Thank you.
statewide picture.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Can I just share something really quick?
Yes,
Sure.
Kathy.
I just wanted to mention too, and I know that Jessica just mentioned it, but a lot of it is also like, if you read the qualifications needed, right? They want people that are professional, but it's like you need a master's degree in early childhood education, and you need to be able to be a rocket scientist, and you need to have 50 years of experience, but we want to pay you $15 an hour.
Exactly.
So that makes it really, really difficult for people who really want to do this work. But as Jessica said, just can't afford to. I mean, a lot of our providers are single parents. As you mentioned, the majority of them are women. So we have a lot of people who really have a lot of heart and really want to do this work. But it's just like, at the end of the day, they have to put food on the table. And it's also, I feel like a lot of programs are, what I've been trying to work with the daycare centers a lot is to increase their sort of professional development, as opposed to requiring people to be at a professional level when they first come in, right? Is helping them to get that professional development as they're enrolled in the program and working in the program. Because, and I will say it a million times, and I've done a million trainings on like staff, people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses, right? It's the work culture component of it too. And it's just investing in your people. So I think there has to be a shift in what is expected for people coming in and how we're treating the people once they're there.
I agree 100%. Classic example when we're talking about co-constructing knowledge. Thank you so much, Kaidi, because I feel that you hit the nail exactly on the head. If we don't redesign our models of profitability inside of childcare centers, and I'm talking specifically about childcare centers, but to a lesser degree, family home programs as well. If we don't change that business model, if we don't become advocates and look for different sources or additional sources of fundings, most childcare centers operate as small businesses with many, many limitations. If we don't change that model, and if at the same time we don't develop new and innovative ways to bring people into the business and to nurture them and bring them along into the business, yes, we will be having the same conversation 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 7 years from now, with or without COVID-19. So I think, some of the conversations that I'm often having is, how are we going to make that shift? How is it that the hospitality agent business has, and again, I live in a part of in work primarily in a part of the country, and there are 1,900 childcare centers in Miami-Dade County alone. The tourism industry has been able to make that shift. The restaurant industry has been able to make that shift. Realistically speaking, we're looking at what, probably 30% of revenue goes to paying staff in that industry. Whereas, I'm going to show you some slides if we get to them this evening, but you'll have them to take away. In some cases it's 53, 63, 70% of every dollar that's spent, 70 cents of every dollar that's spent in an early learning program is going, you got to pay your staff first. And serendipitously or paradoxically, that staff is still grossly underpaid. So that shift, one of my big messages to you this evening, there's I don't know if any of you have listened to a podcast that is very aptly called "No One Is Coming to Save Us." And it is a podcast about the state of the early learning industry. And it's included actually in your resources. One of the podcasts, I think one of the early ones, this series is about 2 years old, and that has become really my rallying cry over the past year. No one is coming to save us. It's time for us to save ourselves. And so the business leadership institutes that I run have been very focused on, okay, how can we become better business people? How can we learn how to grow our own talent? How can we make early childhood desirable again? There was a time when people were, to a certain degree, lining up to come into our doors and to learn and grow to us. And how can we get to a place where we have realistic expectations and actually bring in a prospective staff member, a prospective teacher, and grow that, bring that person along? I'd love to hear about any innovative programming for teachers or for teacher training, if anyone would like to share. I'm going to read also Kathy's writing. I've seen that that rate as 68 to 80% of childcare center spending is on payroll. I can believe it. depending on what your revenue is and what you're paying the staff, and then utilities and so forth, it could definitely be that high. New and inventive programs to provide opportunities to grow our own, so to speak. Well, I will share. I've had an opportunity over the past 2 years to become to work closely with the state of Florida Workforce Board. Another block grant, we all know about the Child Care Development Block Grant, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity grant, a block grant is set up to provide pathways into careers for adults, young adults and adults in various life situations. So over the past 2 years, I've been able to partner and grow 3 specific programs, all focused on early education, unprecedented in Florida. Up until quite recently, the Workforce Board would never work with early education because the salaries were too low. We always have that conversation, and I think Kathy put in the chat box that you can't pay your student loans on $17 an hour. Even $17 an hour is not a living wage. I don't know of many cities where it could be. So one of the things that I would encourage is the first program that was developed was an internship program. And this was a program for out-of-school youth, at-risk youth that met certain guidelines. They could not be in school. They did have to have a high school diploma or a GED, simply for licensing reasons in order to become employed in a child care center. And a public-private partnership was formed to develop a pathway for young people. They were between the ages of 18 and 24, and this is an active program still running today, between 18 and 24 who were recruited and placed in child care centers. Through this partnership, a series of agencies, including the Workforce Innovation Board, got together, paid the interns' salaries. That they are paid $13.88 an hour, not a living wage, but it's a starting wage, and it is above minimum wage for an entry-level job, providing any state required training for those young people, and then providing various supports along the way. If sometimes some of the young people became housing insecure during the course of the program, and coming out the other end through the pilot and the ramp up of the program, we have been able to develop a fairly robust program with at least 5 to 6 interns coming into the program every 90, 120 days or so. So that's one way to be looking at how do you identify perhaps your non-traditional workforce. Another addition, and a much more conventional addition that I invite you to be thinking about, is apprenticeship programs, and specifically registered apprenticeship programs. Nadej and I were talking about apprenticeship programs prior to us starting up this evening. This is a public-private partnership between the agency that administers the federal block grant in South Florida, the Workforce Innovation Board, as well as the local college. And working through the Career Development Office at the local college, we were able to work collaboratively to frame an apprenticeship program that would be 20 months in duration. The Workforce Board came in and said that we will pay a percentage of the salary. The employer pays the other percentage, and the apprentice's education is paid for. So the apprentice will finish after 20 months with a national CDA. And we are very hopeful that once The first group is just now starting, literally started over the past couple of weeks. It took us close to a year to get the program registered with the state of Florida, with the Department of Education. The hope is that the next step will be to work toward an associates of early education, which is happening across the state of Pennsylvania, by the way. We didn't make this stuff up. It's happening in California. It's happening in Colorado and several other places around the country. And our most recently registered program is a pre-apprenticeship program. And that is a program where we will be identifying high school students to work to bring them in, to bring them into early childhood. The idea that ultimately you could be a pre-apprentice, you come in, you're attached to an early learning program, or you may just be doing your educational portion. You may not be doing your OJT portion. You're just getting your education, and that would be any required training and then the start of a national CDA. You finish your pre-apprenticeship and then you're attached to an early learning program. So once you graduate, you go into your early learning program, you become an apprentice, and from there, you are in the system. So as with most programs, it starts small. But prior to the pandemic, there was not even a thought of that. So I'll pause there for some feedback and some thoughts from anyone, and any other ideas that you may have for innovative ways to build the workforce. Okay, well, feel free to add to the chat box anything you'd like to be heard. Let's go to the next slide, please. And I'm taking things out of order because we have just 10 minutes left. A significant but often overlooked fact about early care and education programs in the US is that unlike other educational institutions, most of these programs operate as small businesses. I mentioned that a little earlier, either for-profit or not-for-profit. They could be faith-based, attached to a public school, etc., and rely primarily on tuition revenue. Without careful attention to the business side of the equation, a program risks not only an erosion in the quality of its services, but all too often outright failure. Indeed, poor fiscal management is the primary reason that ECE programs fail. I went back in time to pull out this quote. In your resources is a fairly dated report from 2011 by Louise Stoney, who many of you may know. She's the shared services person, but she also worked in partnership with a woman named Ann Mitchell, and they developed the concept of the iron triangle, which is how do you make your childcare business profitable? You know, you make sure you're fully enrolled, you're connecting tuition consistently from everybody that is in the program, and you build so that essentially you're building up that strong financial foundation. For the purpose of this conversation, it may seem absurd. Heidi, based on what you shared about the way you ran your business, I'm quite sure that your iron triangle was fully intact. However, how many of us work with programs where providers are very comfortable saying, from a compassion perspective, well, I know, you know, this parent just lost his, her, or their job. I'm going to let them slide for a couple of weeks, and you kind of slide into providing free care. Again, when you think about what those expectations, there have been many, there have been, I submit to you, many universal expectations that it's okay for us to do this work for free. You know, it's great to pay, but isn't it nice, you know, if you're compassionate enough to provide childcare without actually being paid for that? In order for us to survive as an industry, we must absolutely flip the switch on that. And not only do any parent-based tuition programs need to be fully implemented, we also need to be looking universally for additional layers of ongoing income into our programs in order to make them grow. These are small businesses, and they do need to be able to operate independently. I'll pause there for feedback, or looking for any feedback in the chat box.
I know
Oh, go ahead, Heidi.
I was just going to say, I know we're running short for time, but I did want to share something because that reminded me. I had a parent who came in his first week and said to me, in my previous childcare, I was supposed to pay on Monday, but sometimes I would forget to give her the check until Wednesday. If I give you yours on Wednesday, do I still need to pay the late fee, even if I have the check in my pocket on Monday? And I said, yes, because I don't have it in my pocket on Monday. I said, you don't go to the doctor and not pay your copay. You don't go to the pharmacy and get your medicine and not pay a copay. You don't tell your car dealership, I'm not going to pay my car loan this month.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. That's it.
Yes, yeah, thank you for sharing, Heidi. And Lisa,
Yeah, I was gonna say that since probably around 2010, a lot of regulations changed in my area of New York State. I guess it was all over, but not only that, a lot more kids were going into like universal pre-K, or they were beginning to start it, where parents don't have to pay. So I don't know if subconsciously I started devaluing myself, I guess you could say, or just worrying that if I'm charging too much, why would parents come to me rather than putting their child into a free program? But I think the problem in the future for this is that people think they're getting it all for free. Taxpayers are still paying, and the limitations of what parents can choose. Now there's sort of like kids are going into a cookie cutter type program, that parents aren't having the options of better quality. I just feel like sort of the government is fighting against the small businesses, where they're actually taking our business away from us. Because if people can get things free and, they can use that extra money to buy things they really want, maybe not necessities, but more pleasures, most people are going to lean toward that, I think. So yeah, I try to be fair to my parents, and maybe I'm not as fair to myself, but I'm at a point in my life where I'm not doing it just for getting rich, because I'm not going to do that. And I have most of all everything paid off in my life, but I just feel bad that people think what they're getting for free, but I think they're really losing a lot too by getting everything for free. And it's really not free, because we're all paying for it.
we are all paying for it. Thank you for that, Lisa. And Kathy's reminding us that surgeons love their jobs, but they definitely expect to get paid. I had valve replacement surgery 4 years ago, and I paid my very substantial copay before I laid down on that table in the operation room, for sure. Absolutely. But I think the important thing is you are running a premium program, and it is important that you be paid. And coming from a place where profitability is not seen as a negative, I think is going to be one tool that we must add to our tool belt as early learning owners, providers, and I am a former owner, no longer, but I am a former owner. And for those of us that support early learning programs, I think reminding that you are a premium program and profitability is the only way that you could provide high quality early learning experiences to the children that you are so privileged to serve.
Lisa, I know we're short on time, but I just want to jump in and say the problem is not that the government is taking kids away. It's that the school systems are not collaborating with the experts in the field, who are people that are like you. And they should be paying you what they're investing in early childhood. They should be investing that with you, so that parents legitimately have a choice. I can have high quality early learning at Lisa's house, or I can have high quality learning at a school, or they ought to have choices. And right now they don't have choices, and you are the expert in it. So go talk to your school district and say, hey, why do you think you can do early learning better than I can do early learning? Let's work together. And charge your parents a lot of money, because if you're a good program, they will be paying a lot of money.
Program. Thank you for that advice, Kathy. And I think building that relationship, challenging conversations with your school district, and vote for childcare. Seek out your legislators, decide what your legislative agenda is. Create a community-based group of your fellow early learning providers. And each year, as your community, your state goes into legislative session, identify your legislative agenda related to the work that you do. And go and visit your lawmakers and let them know that this will be your expectations as a small business owner. Reach out to your chambers of commerce and let them know that you have a legislative agenda and this is what it is. And it will be your expectation that your Chamber of Commerce CEO identifies, makes that part of their collective legislative agenda. And do that year after year and keep those conversations going. Because we are at a crossroads and we are at a place where listening, the ears are opening up and listening is going to be happening. And thank you so much for the strong voices that I'm hearing this evening. Nadej, can we move forward? There's a slide that says the true cost of care. Keep going. Right, go back one. So go forward one. There we are, thank you. We talked about the paradox earlier. There are two things that I want to point out to you on this slide. The costofcare.org calculator. If you are a child care operator and you haven't used it, you should. If you support early learning programs and you're not familiar with these tools, you should please become familiar with them. There are links to two particular tools. The costofchildcare.org calculator is a very straightforward care. I went through it and did it for several places in New York as I prepared to meet with you this evening. We'll talk more about it in our next session. The Office of Child Care Provider Cost of Quality Calculator. This is a link to the main user page. You can go in, very easily register and start playing around with some preset numbers. You're going to learn about what the cost of care is. Some very smart people have spent a good deal of time doing the background work so you can get some good numbers that mesh with your community or with your state, and you can play around with them a little bit. And again, as you start thinking about if you're a child care operator, making your business profitable or working toward profitability and longevity and permanency for you in your business, or if you're supporting early learning programs, I encourage you between now and our next session to spend a little time becoming familiar with that tool. Next time I'm going to be asking you about the market rates in your community. What are they? Are they fair? Is there room for them to grow? Of course, we hear that some infant tuitions are as much as college tuitions. So again, we have another tension that we'll be taking up. Essentially non-essential is what we so often call childcare workers. And here's a quote from an anonymous preschool teacher. I make $11 an hour and I'm exhausted. My credit cards are almost maxed out and my savings are dwindling. It's not looking good. I stay because I love the kiddos. It breaks my heart to think about having to find a new job. We're going to pick up with who's teaching the children with our next session. We're going to move forward to the slide, Nadej, that says restorative practice and closing. There we are. So another opportunity to share. I hope it would be very helpful to me if you would share one takeaway from tonight's session and also share with us a word or a phrase that captures the promise of your work. Or just let us know, is your glass half empty or is it half full? We don't have time for everybody, but I hope that a couple of you will either check us out in the chat box or make the decision to unmute and share. Joy's telling us that she agrees with Lisa Zimmerman and Kathy Broder in regards to the cookie cutter model of home child care programs. There needs to be more advocates to help fund child care programs. The market rates are not fair with the cost of wages going up. And Nancy is letting us know that my glass is half full, but sometimes there's a crack in it. Thank you, Nancy, for sharing. Would anybody else like to share a takeaway or a perspective of their cup this evening? Well, hearing none, I'm going to remind you that there are plenty of in-service readings on the second to last slide in your deck. I hope that you will listen or read or watch at least one or two of the selections that I've prepared for you. The information about my office hours for December 9th are there. I would love to chat with one or a couple or many of you on the first. My email address is on my bio, to the left of my picture, and all of the resources that we talked about this evening are there. We didn't necessarily stay on slide. That's pretty typical for me. I want to be honest with you. If any of you have seen my presentations before, you will know that about me. However, this belongs to you. We are recorded. You can watch again. Please take a walk through and take a look at some of the links, take a look at some of the references. And with that, if there are no closing remarks or any additional closing remarks, I just want to say that I enjoyed spending my evening with you this evening. I can't resist reading that Kathy Broder is sharing that it's better when I don't talk, LOL, I am too bossy. Thank you all. This is a good opportunity for childcare. People are looking. They are always looking. They are looking indeed. And from my end of the internet to yours, I want to wish you a beautiful evening. I look forward to seeing you on December 13th at 6:30 p.m. And for us to bring to closure this conversation. And with that, I'm going to say namaste, and I will see you in just a couple of weeks' time. Thank you for your time this evening, and thank you all for leaning in.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone. It's a great
night.
conversation.
Thank
Night,
you.
everybody. Oh, Alyssa, are you gonna email the PowerPoint too?
Yes, I'll send it out
Great.
to you all. and,
Sometimes my
Good night,
chat gets
everyone.
funky.
yeah, no, I'll send it out to everyone, and as well as just a reminder for her next training as well.
Okay. Yeah, I tried to copy and paste it and it was just like,
Yeah, no, all good. I'll send it.
it was
email so you
funky.
just have it as a PDF.
All right. Thank you. Have a good
Perfect.
night, everybody.
Have a good night, everyone.
You too.